Well, I have to say, to begin with, it's quite an ambitious request for me to pull together all of the things that were talked about today. I listened into a lot of the talks, and there was so much exploration into so many different areas that I think for the listeners, there's the potential for, in some ways, the challenge of complexity that's been present in this experience today, where when you get all these different downloads, all these different perspectives, and you get dimensionality, and you get energy stuff, and you get healing, and oh my god, there's entities that might be attached to you if you've had some trauma in your life, and how do you deal with that stuff? Well, you burn some Palo Santo, and make sure you keep that going in your space. And this experience can be both exciting but also overwhelming to receive information in that kind of way. And so
That's a good point. It's a good point that if it feels too overwhelming, just step back and integrate what you can and then come back for more, because we're at the cutting edge of something here.
And the first thing that I would really love to do with the community here today is sort of bring it back down into its quintessence, so to speak, like drop into the real simplicity of what we're dealing with and how we engage this experience in our reality, and how do we integrate this kind of information with clear, logical understanding, and really get to experience the beauty and the benefit of the connection with other beings that is so much of what extraterrestrial disclosure is really about. So that's where I'd like to take you guys today, is kind of bring in a little bit more grounding, reconnect us to the larger story of disclosure that is something that's not, this is not a modern phenomena. This is something that has, thousands and thousands and thousands of years of implications and roles for humanity. And where we're going together in our future is something that is so exciting, and it's so rich and so beautiful where we can end up from this journey. And I think that by getting a bigger perspective and really stepping back and looking at the big picture as a whole, we start to be able to gain our own insight into how we get to participate in this incredible phenomena of being a species, becoming aware of itself, and realizing that our next step is to become part of a galactic civilization. To me, that is a very, very exciting thing. And it's so much of what my life work is dedicated to, is helping people to make that transition. So to start off, I want to just remind you guys of the incredible confluence of revelations that have been happening right now. We have these different speakers showing up here telling you about their personal experiences, and the wave of disclosure through our modern society and life through the internet, and the power of this global media and communications tool is just phenomenal. We see people talking about UFOs, about contact experiences, about direct downloads, about dreams, about the presences of astral beings showing up in their rooms at night. And at the same time as there's all of this controversial and in many ways very, very edgy, very, very questionable personal subjective data and consciousness coming out, we're also starting to really be able to begin integrating the wisdom about extraterrestrial cultures that has already been on this planet for a very, very long time. When we start to look into ancient cultures and we look at the work of people like Graham Hancock, John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, Michael Tellinger, and others, we see that there are all of these different places in the world where extraterrestrial wisdom and consciousness is very, very likely to have already existed. We see this pointer in all of these different civilizations leading back to the idea that maybe we actually had a fully connected global civilization at one point in time that was extremely advanced. And while that may not be new information for many of you watching this, it's important to remember that in school and in academic establishments that exist right now, we do not learn about that in history. The story we are told is one of an evolution of human consciousness from the period of time, going back to the Neanderthals, and then we see the first kind of baby civilization stuff in Sumeria, and then humanity starts growing up, and we're supposed to just continue going in this kind of straight line to the modern age where everything's very, very advanced. And yet, when we look back to Sumeria, we see very advanced knowledge and technology. We see advanced writing, advanced sciences, astronomical sciences that point to a variety of planetary structures in our current solar system that may or may not have existed. We see in the origin story from the Nippur tablet some information that clearly describes something like beings that were able to travel across the sky, who came down and interacted with humanity, and in this process, generated some beings that were able to work for them or be in service to them. And we have many, many different people who have provided different theories about the Anunnaki and the Nephilim and different potential, possibly extraterrestrial civilizations and beings that were interacting with the Sumerians. Now, if we jump over to Egypt, we see an entirely different picture, but also likewise extremely advanced. And as Graham Hancock puts it, it's as if a super advanced civilization with mathematics and construction and all of these things just popped out of nowhere. There it is, boom. And when it popped out of nowhere, they already had the extremely advanced mathematics to be able to craft and sculpt massive pyramids, to be able to carve a sphinx that is absolutely incredible. And by the watershed dating and the erosion structures around the Sphinx, we've looked at when the possibility was when that kind of water damage could have happened, and it points to the end of the last ice age, suggesting that some structure in the Sphinx as well, whether it was the Sphinx or not, may actually be as old as the last ice age, which is far, far before our historical Egyptian civilization. When we consider the pyramids, there's often a heated debate about, well, of course, humans can roll big stones on logs, right? But how do you move stones across a river? How do you mine stones from 100 miles away, move them, get them across a river, and get them up into place? And if you follow the story of the current historical studies of Egyptian culture and the current archaeological presentations that the pyramids were built as tombs for the pharaohs, well, then you need to get one of those giant, massive, multi-ton stones into place within a matter of minutes. Every single stone has to get all the way from the quarry to the place where it's being laid in and put in its exact location within minutes. And that's just completely illogical. And that's just getting started. I mean, you talk about Incan cities and you look at the structures of the way the stones are wrapped together. You look at the Nazca lines. Why were they making giant art to show to the sky? We look at Mayan civilization. Now, the Maya had an extremely advanced time-space-based system. The Maya were building incredible architecture. They were recording dates. They had a very, very advanced astronomical knowledge and calendar system. And the Maya very clearly in their stories said that they came from the 4 corn people that came from the 4 directions of the river in the sky. And when they illustrate this river in the sky, they always put the river in the sky, and then they also show the ecliptic with the planets in the ecliptic. And so we know this river in the sky is actually the Milky Way galaxy. And so they say that the people of this planet came from these 4 corn people, these different colored people from different places across the galaxy. And then when we go to other civilizations, other areas of the world, we find underwater pyramids in Japan and Portugal, off the Azores, and on and on and on. And then when we fast forward, we start to see all of these different very interesting stories come out in a little bit, later on ancient civilizations, but still pretty ancient from our standpoint. When we look at Greek and Roman cultures, we come across all of these different stories of gods and goddesses. Here's this one god and this other god, and they're fighting in the sky. They come down, they mate with the humans, and they make these demigod offsprings. And these demigod offspring have extra special powers because they know how to work with the field. They know how to move the fabric of space. They know how to do feats of strength that are not seen anywhere else. If we look to Nordic cultures, we find the beautiful stories that have only recently reached the mass consciousness through the Thor movies, but the ancient tales of Valhalla and the bridge between Asgard and Midgard. In other words, literally, in the way they describe it, a burning rainbow bridge that links another world in the sky to this world, and that could actually be used to travel between the two worlds. And in the Nordic stories, the gods often come in and they travel on these light bridges, coming into this world, and oftentimes helping different tribes do different things, or in other stances, giving the tribes on this planet different gifts that provide them with special tools to progress in their use of life and their way of doing things, to give them more comfort, to be more powerful, and many other things. In the Irish lands, we see, across Ireland, we see some of the oldest stories of the people arriving in Ireland. And one of the stories is of the Tuatha De Danann. And the Tuatha De Danann were said to have come from 3 islands in the sky. And they came riding clouds when they arrived, on the island isles in the British Isles. And they brought with them, interestingly enough, 4 very special tools. Now, this is a very, very ancient story that the Irish have held. And yet the 4 tools that the Tuatha De Danann brought are a massive cauldron and a very special magical stone and a spear that when you hold the spear, according to the legends, you could never fail in battle, which later on often is transcribed as the spear that pierced Jesus, and a magical sword known as Caliburn later on, which eventually became Excalibur, and what we know of as the Excalibur sword and the stone that Arthur used to unite the tribes. And these 4 symbols are actually the 4 suits of the tarot. And so even though the tarot deck didn't even emerge really until thousands of years after the Tuatha De Danann were said to arrive in the islands there, these keys of wisdom and knowledge brought by this strange people who had somewhat elven characteristics, as you could say, arriving there, brought to that land, so did those threads of wisdom pass elsewhere and across the world, and that we are still using here today. Now, if we look at places like things like health and medicine, we also see extremely advanced medicines being cultivated by what we believe as being very primitive tribes. In the Amazon, somehow, out of all the plants in the Amazon, and if you know anything about the Amazon forest, it's insanely dense. And there are so many plants and vines and trees and flowers, and there are so many different things there. And yet somehow out of all of those things, the Amazonian tribes were able to find 2 different plants. One we call the Banisteriopsis caapi, which is the ayahuasca vine, and another one we call Psychrotia viridis, which is the chacruna vine and the chacruna leaf. And we mix this ayahuasca vine and the chacruna leaf together, and you get this mix that they call ayahuasca, which contains DMT and is probably one of the most powerful and transformative healing medicines on the planet. There are many, many, many stories of absolutely epic transformations people have gone through using this particular medicine. And many of the shamans and the people that have worked with this medicine often talk about the people in the stars. And there are certain ayahuasquero artists whose all their illustrations always include windows to other worlds and advanced cities with rainbow bridges and spacecraft in the sky, spacecraft connecting and communicating to ayahuasqueros and to the plants and the animals. And so there's obviously a very ancient wisdom tradition and connection between the extraterrestrial beings that are out there and these ayahuasqueros that have been using this medicine. And somehow they managed to find these two plants that come together in this extremely special way that we're only beginning to really understand in modern science to create this experience. Now, in other cultures, there are also similar things to this. For the Aztec or the Nahuatl people, there's the use of peyote, which is a cactus which contains mescaline. Radiocarbon dating of the archaeological specimens of peyote in use date back over 5,500 years. Now that puts it in the ancient cultures department. And yet these people were already using this medicine. And again, the cultures using this type of medicine talk very clearly and significantly about their Star Nation relationships. And you also see other Star Nation relationships among other North American and Central American tribes. The Lakota often talk about White Buffalo Calf Woman, the woman who brought them the different ceremonies of the Lakota and many of the traditions of the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota Sioux. And White Buffalo Calf Woman is apparently a Star Nation representative who came down to help them through a time of great change and come out of a time of war into a time of greater peace. In the African tribes, we have Iboga as an extremely advanced medicine that is now being shown as one of the key factors of being able to completely eradicate addictions in people with severe addictions and severe traumatic issues. And then you also have Nordic peoples who have used the medicine Amanita muscaria, the little white and red mushroom that you pick up in Super Mario and makes you big, you know? And the stories about the use of this mushroom as a medicine are often told in a way where basically the shamans traveling through, and I apologize again for using this word shaman, it's actually inappropriate. There's a general consensus around this use in modern times that suggests that different medicinal users and witches and people with magical capacity from different traditions are called shamans. This is not actually true. The word shaman actually comes from a very, very specific tradition. And that specific tradition in Mongolia is not actually represented by these other cultures. So I just want to say that because it's pretty common for many of us to use that word, and it's actually not completely accurate. So we could say that that some of these Nordic wisdom keepers would basically bring these mushrooms to different homes, especially in the wintertime. They'd have gathered them and they'd be bringing them to the homes, and they would enter the homes through a hatch in the roof because the drifts would be really high. And then they'd go and they'd hang these mushrooms above the fireplace so they could dry out, like stockings. And so these guys, you can imagine them in red and white or green, coming in through the roof and hanging these things on the walls, and to what? Give the gift of cheer and light and enable people to see the connection and the light and the life force still flowing in everything during the heart of winter. Very, very beautiful stories. And so that's just a taste. I mean, that's just a tiny bit of the kinds of culture experiences of these cultures that have been shared for thousands of years, trying to disclose to us consciousness about our relationship with other beings and other cultures from other places in the galaxy. And I could spend the next few hours continuing to present on these different beings and these different cultures and their different relationships. But at this point, I'd like to transition you a little bit and tell a little bit of my experience and some of the realizations that I've had about these different species and their relationships with different cultures here on Earth. So I went through a series of pretty dynamic transformations when I was a teenager. I woke up to my human energy field when I was about 15. I was a very logical, scientific person, and my approach to this experience was based on certain questions that I had. Many of you that have seen some other interviews or talks by me might know what these are, but I'll share for the benefit of this audience that I was really curious how it's possible that someone could be looking at you from across a room on your body, on your neck. How is that possible? And I also began to deeply wonder about the fact of how it's possible that oftentimes, and most people have had this experience, you would think about somebody, they'd pop into your head, and then the next thing you know, the phone rings and it happens to be them. How is that possible? And I started doing experiments with different people in my life, and in particular, one close friend of mine who was somewhat of a philosopher, very interested in the psychology of people, and we began to do different tests. And in those tests, I discovered that if I simply connect my fingertips and very slowly separate them, I would actually begin to feel a tangible energy field connecting my fingertips. I would begin to actually be able to see threads of light and sparks between my fingers, and that I could increase the size of that field and that it wouldn't go away. And that it wasn't my own feedback loop of consciousness, because if you put somebody else's hand out and they close their eyes and they have no idea what's going to go on, and you run that same stream of fingertips over their hand, that they actually feel a sensation. And now this is just now beginning to be studied in science as potentially the paramagnetic field of the body, and the parasensory perception of the human body. And there's some great research coming out about this. But when I was 15, there was nothing like that. It was the craziest thing to think that the human body had this energy force around it. And the more tests we did, the more it proved to us that this energy field experience is not just local. It's connecting us to every point in the fabric of space-time simultaneously. And that you can actually tap into things like the energy at the center of the earth or the energy in the center of the sun, and actually feel and receive an influx of that energy to your body that will transform your experience. Now, we continued to test this with other people, and by the time I graduated from high school, I did a major project trying to pull together what I discovered around these experiences and what I began to discover on the internet around Tai Chi and martial arts that use Chi and Ki as an energy field that supports the power of those martial arts, prana and yogic practices that move this energy field inside our body, the Odic force and the Nordic magical traditions that talk about accessing and moving this force, the Irish and Celtic traditions and the Celtic knotwork that actually describes how different elements weave together to create different creations. Now, there are books and stories and movies that many of us have read that tap into these same concepts. If you've ever read the Robert Jordan series, the beings there are weaving different elementals together to change things. If you've watched the Avatar series, people are tapping into these fundamental movements of the body to initiate and express energy. but I wanted to know the science behind it. I wanted to understand the physics of this experience. And so I dove deep into a study of physics, and I studied loop quantum gravity, quantum mechanics, special and general relativity, string theory, and on, and explored the cutting edge ideas in all of these areas. And this led me to a sort of unified presentation and understanding that there are keys and secrets in all of those leading edge areas of physics. And they all point towards a unified physics that actually describes this fundamental ether, this fundamental energy field. And that it's not new to science. It's been around for thousands of years. And in fact, all the philosophies, which was the origin of science and physics, all the philosophies into science contained the ether and contained these same ideas all the way up to the beginning of the 1900s. And then things shifted, and they shifted quite dramatically. And so in my journey, I began to realize that these are not just strange foreign concepts. The idea of the human energy body, the experience of the force, the ability of one to master the force. I realized that it was a carrying on of an ancient tradition of beings that had been studying this consciousness and the nature of consciousness for millennia, on and on and on back into Earth's history, and then off of Earth and into other planetary systems. When I started college, one of the first and very powerful experiences I had around that time was having an instantaneous flashback with two of my close friends. And we ended up in a giant crystal temple where we were surrounding this pillar, and we were installing these energetic keys into this crystal pillar. And the experience of doing this, we knew that we were about to die. And I knew that there was a massive wave coming, and it was going to wipe out our temple, and it was going to wipe out this space, and that we had to store these keys away so that in the future we could come back and bring these keys back out and share them with humanity at different times. And we flashed back into my friend's dorm room after having this experience in this moment, and we all were just completely shocked. It was very intense experience. It was so intense energetically that it's one of those kinds of things where afterwards you wonder if it even happened, if it's even possible that it happened, because it was so strong and so visceral and so real. And that night, each of us had different dreams. And all of us dreamed similar dreams of being in this civilization that was a global civilization on planet Earth, in which there was a massive earth change happening. And there were waves coming in from all these directions, and that the cities that we lived in were going to be destroyed. And in this Atlantean-like civilization at the end of the last ice age, we were storing away the keys that we had accessed and brought to this planet to do our sacred work. Now, that was the beginning of a whole wheel of experiences for me, in which I began to meet different people and have these spontaneous recall experiences with different people throughout my life. And many of them I was going to college with, and some of them I was in relationships with. And as a logical studier, as a scientific studier of my own consciousness, my own experience, and other people's experience, it was one thing when I had a memory with one other person and something happened and we were able to suddenly see and connect to this memory from another time. But it was an entirely different experience when someone I didn't even know, who I had just met, who didn't even know really everybody in the group of our friends, gets drunk at a Halloween party, and he starts crying and apologizing to me and this other beautiful lady for all of these crimes that he had committed against us in the late Middle Ages. And as he's crying, he's calling me by the name that I had remembered from that time and that she had remembered from that time. And I am viscerally in my body feeling the awareness and the pain and the trauma around the things that he did and the fight that we had and the battles that we had and killing each other at the end of our lives. And this visceral experience was so intense, and so potent, and also came with the clarity of the third party, where it wasn't my assessment, it wasn't my idea, it wasn't my experience even, it was somebody else's entirely. And yet their experience was so true to my memory and to my being that everything that he said, I could remember fully. I knew exactly what happened. I knew exactly how it went down. I even remembered the moment in which I killed him and he stabbed me too deep and I fell to the ground and I died. And I had to start taking into account a wider field of information and data. I had to start accepting the fact that maybe the information that I have now, maybe the wisdom that I bring forward, maybe the ideas that I had when I was in high school, and my inspiration and my passion to explore all of these different fields in energy and metaphysics and science were actually not new interests for me. That maybe they were actually part of my experience for a very, very long time. And that I was just recovering the information, bringing it back into the now. And I tell this story because my extraterrestrial contact experience came as a direct result of this kind of integration of myself throughout my time on Earth. I had just completed a series of prayer runs for world peace. In particular, the first one that I had done, where there were runners from the four corners of North America, of Turtle Island, and I was working with the group from the East Coast. And myself and a group of indigenous youth from all around tribes on the East Coast and all the way through to the Great Lakes, were going to run across the country carrying an eagle staff and praying for peace with every step as we ran all the way from the West Coast, hot sunny day, spiraling, all running the last miles in together and circling around a sacred fire and feeling the union of Turtle Island coming together in that run, and feeling and hearing the calls of the sacred animals and the white animals, the white buffalo, the white eagle, the white lion, the white tiger, and feeling this family of energy coming together and really being drawn from around the world and anchoring that in solid connection and communion and a brotherhood and a truth space, where people could actually recognize that we are here to bring peace to this earth. And so I got really, really grounded in that prayer run. And I had one of the most powerful experiences of my entire existence. Now, that story is a very long one, and it's one that I tell elsewhere and I have written down, and I have shared it many, many times. But to share it in brief, what I was able to accomplish during that night was a level of healing of myself, and particularly my connection with Mother Gaia and the Divine Mother and the divine feminine essence of all existence, by clearing this karma that I was still holding with my mother from the time of Atlantis, who I met there in the desert and had deep experiences with. And I healed that wound with my father from the time of Atlantis, who I also met there in the desert. And in doing this very deep and powerful healing, I was able to begin to recover a deeper level of my connection with myself and who I am. I was able to clear some contracts and relationships with others that I've had since before I came to this planet. And in the release of these agreements and in the release of some of this powerful tool that I had given myself to remember who I am, I opened up a whole new level of awareness. And I knew that I was not from this earth. I knew very, very clearly, and I remembered very clearly being a Syrian ambassador and looking at Earth and knowing that it was time, as the Ice Age came in around the planet and all of these peoples were unifying and connecting with each other and having this incredible renaissance, and that it was time for Earth to become part of this greater galactic family. And I was not the only one. There were many, many, many people from many, many different species who all saw this planet in its time of need and knew that they could come in and that they could help, but they couldn't do it for humanity. They could never do it for humanity. Humanity must take the step itself. And so to do this transition, many of these extraterrestrial beings decided to die and leave their bodies and travel to Earth as souls and be born as humans and be born often into species of humanity or races of humanity that were already hybrids, that already had genetics from mating with gods and goddesses and having these connections with different extraterrestrial species over millennia before this time ever happened. And so we were tracking those soul lines and we were tracking those genome lines, and we became born into these different human races in order to help bring together the human races and help them to see that as one planet, as one species, they could be ready to ascend into the stars and become part of this much greater family of beings from all over the galaxy. So as we know, in the time of Atlantis, that was not able to occur. We know that the waters came and the end of the Ice Age occurred, and humanity did not make the leap, and many things were forgotten. But many trails were left, many gifts and many seeds and many timekeepers, many buildings and constructions that would hold the codes for the time when the world would become one again. And so I've been here traveling on this planet, lifetime through lifetime, trying to recover what I can, trying to spread what I can, trying to do what I can do with my family, my soul family, and many other soul families that are here doing this sacred work. Many of you on this call may resonate with this and know that this is your work as well. Until the time when the world would be one again, well, here we are, and the sacred hoop is being woven. You're watching me from many places in the world. You might be watching me instantaneously right now as I share with you and transmit and download this truth and this knowledge and this authenticity of my personal experience to you. But you might also be watching this a month from now. You might be watching this a year from now and know these truths, because the ripple of our interconnectivity has reached a point where we are now capable of being one human species. We have tools for telepathic augmentation, devices we can use to instantaneously call, tap in, text, write, email each other in the moment that we feel the connection with someone. And these tools verify for us our innate capacities. They verify for us these ancient secrets and these wisdom traditions from around the world. They verify for us and augment for us our abilities. And we must remember that we must keep them in check, because all technology, anything that we may make, no matter how advanced the computing system, will it compare to the technology that we are already built with? We must realize that there's always augmentation. There are always tools to enhance our capacities. And the Star Nations know this very, very well. And they've learned that if it's possible for an individual to astral travel, in other words, if it's possible for your mind to travel to another location instantaneously and get information from that location, then it's also possible that a ship that has a mind-body interface could respond to the information fed to that ship by that astral bilocation. And so superluminal travel becomes possible not through mapping every part of the sky, not through knowing where every star is going to be, especially ones that are 10,000 light years away, because it's not in the same position at this moment. You have to develop these inner tools and inner capacities to see those locations and be able to travel to them inside yourself first. And then you can develop the technology that augments that ability and allows you to do that travel. We're discovering the same thing when it comes to energy systems. Many of us have been looking at 0-point energy systems and different dynamics as new technologies may or may not emerge from different leaders and different individuals working on advanced work at this time. But we must understand that underneath that technology, there's us. There's our 0-point energy system. There is our body. And our bodies are a vehicle for energy. Have you ever had the experience of being super tired and super hungry and totally lacking in energy, and then something happened and you realized something, or someone said something to you, or you read something, and then all of a sudden it's as if all of the engines in your body turn on, and the next thing you know, you're overflowing with ecstatic electric energy and every cell in your body is ringing like a bell? Where did that come from? Where did all that energy emerge from? If you've ever been a runner or you've ever participated in a sport, you know the experience of second winds and third winds when your body kicks in and there's another driver of energy that's propelling you. The thing about this energy, the thing about this connection that we have through the quantum vacuum, through the field itself, is that we are all interconnected with that energy. We all have it. There is no hierarchy in it. No being has access to more of it than any other. Every being has equality in consciousness, and every being has the capacity to see each other and see themselves for the truth of who they truly are and the gift that they have within. And there are also universal laws connected to the principles of these energies. In order to propagate a free energy system across the planet, you must recognize the true meaning of what free energy is. You have to realize that you cannot make free energy systems and then control them with a few people. It won't work. It fails. Free energy will only reach the world when we realize that we must give it away. Then it's free. Then it is truly free energy. When the devices and the technologies that are in development are recognized to be such that they must be shared, they must be given away, they must be distributed across the planet, and the tools and technologies for building them must be open sourced. Because the source must be open, and we must be open to experience this unlimited energy. And so the universal law is protecting and encoding our own evolutionary process, allowing us to develop ourselves and develop the capacities and the gifts within each of us to realize that if I'm going to be the giver of free energy, if I'm going to be the one, I can't do it for me. I can't do it to become extremely wealthy. I can't do it. And that's why so many systems develop and then they get bought out or people get wiped out. Because those people are keeping them secret and they're hiding them away and they're not giving their insights and their knowledge to the world. A big part of my desire and interest and participation in the Resonance Academy is because through the Resonance Academy, we've realized we need to give the tools of the physics. We need to give the insights of the sacred geometry of the fabric of reality to as many people as possible. Because we're all scientists. We all need to discover. And sure, courses cost money, but hey, you know, I could either work at McDonald's or I could spend my life dedicated to giving all of the information that I have to every single person that I can. And it's great if I can buy my dinner because of that. It's great and it's beautiful. We should be supporting each other in giving our gifts and giving what we have. And yes, charge for your gifts if you need to. That's right. It's okay. You can. Money is not the root of all evil. It is a currency. And our currency as we have it right now is unfortunately extremely abused. But there are much more advanced systems of currency. One of which that I'm very interested in bringing to this planet as an enlightened structure, is what me and my colleagues call it, is the enlightened structure of the trust exchange. The trust exchange is a system that recognizes that one of the most fundamental currencies in our reality and in our existence is the experience of trust. If we don't trust someone, then there's no value in what they have to offer us. It's so difficult right now for us to search Google or search the web to find the things that are really, really valuable to us and are also true. We all know the experience of all the headlines that just grab you and they suck you in. They come in through your email, they come in there, and you read the article and you're, God, this is such BS. It's just not true. My body feels the weight of the lack of truth and the lack of integrity in this article that I'm reading right now. And yet, who's to judge whether it's true or not? Who's saying? How do I know? Well, if it's about physics, then I want to have the ability to surface my trust in physicists who I trust to show me what articles they think have qualities that I can trust. And if I'm looking for products, I want to know what my friends think are good products, not just by some gamed like on Facebook, but by real surfacing of trust. And trust is not omnidirectional, by the way. There isn't one rating you can give. If you listen to this talk from me right now and you're watching this right now, there are certain things that I'm sharing with you and certain keys that I'm sharing with you in the approach and in the way that I'm sharing with you that lets you trust me in very specific areas. But there are also many areas that I have not talked about. And there are many aspects of who I am that you may not trust yet. Why? Because you don't know about those parts of me, right? And so trust has a spectrum. There are many, many different ways that we can give and receive trust based on different categories and topics and understandings. And by learning how to work with the dynamics of trust, we also realize that our own integrity and our own transparency and how we behave is directly connected to this exchange of trust. And so, whereas I wouldn't walk in a room and throw a bunch of crap at everybody and walk into a presentation where someone's speaking on the stage and start booing him because of one sentence he says in the beginning of his presentation, just like I wouldn't do that, most people wouldn't do that. Because when you're in person with people, you don't want to affect the trust of all those people in that room in you. You don't want to damage your integrity and the ripple of integrity that happens from that kind of transgression. And on the web, there are no ramifications for that. I can go on anybody's YouTube, I can go on with any kind of alias, and I can just be a troll and just throw stuff at them all day long. And it doesn't matter if what they're saying is true or not. I can pick up any part of it I disagree with, and I can rail on them. And there's nobody to say, well, is this person's response? I don't trust this person's response. It's intense. I don't like how they responded, so I don't want to see their responses anymore. Very, very simple things. But this is a galactic technology. This is a system that by externalizing it, we get to know the depth of our own trust, our own integrity on such a much deeper level. We get to understand the importance of staying in integrity and acting through integrity and staying in alignment with our word and meaning exactly what we say. And if we don't say exactly what we mean, then let us say it again and let us be more careful and conscious of the words that we use to express things. For many of us, as we've been looking at this extraterrestrial disclosure issue, there's a lot of talk about dimensionality. One of the principles of dimensionality that I want to express to you all in order to clarify some of the issues and misconceptions that occur around dimensionality is to remind you that if you understand the actual geometry and mathematics of dimensionality, you realize that when you have a point and that point is contained within a new dimension, which is a line, the point doesn't go away. The point always exists. It's always there. It's in the line. When you have a plane, well, that line that existed there before, that's now a part of this plane, continues to exist in that plane. When that plane becomes three-dimensional space, does the plane stop existing? No, it's always there. It continues to exist inside that three-dimensional space. When space is seen as something moving through time, in other words, you see the fourth dimension where three-dimensional space, you can see it like a sphere or a planet moving through space. When we see that happen in that trail, does the planet go away? Does it disappear? Does the 3D go away? Absolutely not. It's totally there. If we begin to see not only that things in 3 dimensions move through time, but they also create greater patterns in time. So there are synchronistic patterns that occur at this point in time in the spiral of the Earth and the Sun traveling through the galaxy, with places and points when the Earth was here in its spiral, moving around the Sun, traveling around the galaxy. And these connection points are fifth dimensional perception. This is the ability to see synchronicity through time. In other words, to see the lattice of time as a pattern in itself and see the patterns inside of it. But does the Earth go away? Does its travel through time go away? No. All of that continues to exist. It's just that you now have a greater perspective of how time moves. And so this is a really important concept for people to get, because oftentimes, without this mathematical and geometric knowledge, many people end up talking about different extraterrestrial species and saying, oh, they're fifth dimensional. I heard a woman's presentation one night. Hey, Alan, I see you coming back in there. I heard a woman's presentation one night where she was talking about ninth dimensional Arcturians, and she was showing everybody pictures of lens flares on the screen. And these lens flares at different streetlights, she says they always show up around streetlights. And she said the ninth dimensional Arcturians are non-physical, and they are little small beings, and they ride spaceships, and they do this kind of thing. And, you know, that brought up for me like a little bit of fundamental issues, which is that it's important to recognize that even if a being or a species has higher dimensional consciousness, fifth dimensional, sixth dimensional, seventh dimensional consciousness, the appropriate way to translate that is that they're more aware of the patterns in all layers of existence, not necessarily that they're non-physical. And many of the extraterrestrial beings I've been in contact with want to be very clear with you all that many of them are physical and live on planets and eat food and go to the bathroom. And I'll pause right there and let Alan come in.
No, we just have to finish up. I mean, it's been really great. Actually, I want to interview you on multidimensionality for my program, New Realities. So, I mean, it's been a full day, and I know we've just started on dimensionality, and that goes on infinitely. So, we should wrap it up. But any final words that you want to leave people with in terms of activating their own awareness, in terms of showing them their multidimensional beingness and accessing the ET realities themselves?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share that. And I thank you all so much for just listening to me just download you and express to you what I'm here to share. And my original time frame Neil gave to me was from 8:30 to 10 o'clock my time. So I apologize that I didn't know we were trying to wrap up.
What is
I'm
your
happy
time
to wrap
now?
up in the next 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Okay,
that'll be 9:30 my
sure.
time.
Okay, what time is it there? Because I'm
It's
in a hole.
about 9:20 right now. So it's
Okay. I didn't realize that because I'm in a hole at the dimension over here. So okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, finished up a little bit, and it's been great. I mean, we still have pretty much everyone who started in the beginning of the day is still here listening. So yeah,
That's
please
great.
finish up. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd be happy to, Alan. And thank you so much for being such a gracious host and taking care and driving the flow today through all the different speakers.
Well, this is what I love. This is the information, the excitement, the new avenues of consciousness is what I'm passionate about. So I'm happy. Oh, I just got a thing. Neil said you started earlier than originally. So anyway, go ahead, finish up, and yeah, we'd love to hear. I'd love to hear more, and I definitely want to interview you. So we'll
Thank
do
you.
that. So go ahead,
Thank you.
please.
Yes. Well, I can't help but express, as I'm expressing this truth of multidimensionality, it's something that I'm very precise at. So I know exactly that I started an hour ago. And so I'm just presencing that, and I'm aware of the patterns and processes. And I'm so happy to tie these things together, because I have led you all on a little bit of a journey. And my work has been to communicate to you the simplicity inside of each of these things, to bring it back down and ground us in the awareness of the simple truth underlying a lot of these ideas. And there are many, many places you can learn more about my work and watch different transmissions on my work. You can learn about some of the galactic history work that I've done. I did an interview with Alfred Weber, which covers a lot of my interpersonal psychology work that I've done, integrating experiences of many, many different people to tell the story of what happened, in particularly with the reptilians and the relationship to the dragons and what happened in the Orion Wars. It's a great thing to explore because it's deeply related to a lot of the trauma and the issues that many people are experiencing and facing right now in this time. I personally am a faculty member of the Resonance Academy. If you want to learn more about unified physics, come and join us there. And I also am a founder and faculty of the Guardian Alliance. And the Guardian Alliance is really my baby. It's my heart and soul. And it's a metaphysical and consciousness training ground for people to step into their true self-mastery through integrative studies of energy and practices that help you to develop your specific gifts in consciousness, your superhero powers, so that you can become a guardian for the earth. You can hold space for the planet as she goes through her transition. And you can also become a guardian of others and actually help steward these beautiful beings of this planet who are in their adolescence, this human adolescence, that are wild and crazy and lost and sometimes, popping open and opening up their sexuality, and there's all this stuff happening, and they're like, oh my gosh, anything could happen. And you can actually be that guardian and that guide who shows up at that, high school keg party, so to speak, of humanity, and actually, takes a couple people under your wing and reminds them that there's more to this whole picture than they ever thought existed. So come over to the Guardian Alliance and check that out. You can just search for Guardian Alliance or guardian.is. I'm going to be doing another intensive on extraterrestrial species here on Portal to Ascension. That's on September 17th, and I believe it's at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And so that should be a little bit more accessible for our European audiences, and hopefully get some early morning Australian friends in as well. But in that particular talk, I'm going to go really in depth into each of these different extraterrestrial species and how to recognize and identify different qualities of different species, so that if you're out calling in starships, you're opening up your telepathy and you're opening up your chakras and going into space to connect, you can identify who you're working with, and you understand if you're not from this planet, and if you're like me and you're a traveler of many worlds, and you feel like even with all this advanced technology on Earth, it's actually really pretty primitive right now. If you feel that way, like this is kind of clunky and primitive, you're probably not from this planet, and you've probably experienced many more advanced civilizations. And there are certain qualities to those civilizations and to your experience on other worlds that you can identify and figure out where you're from, and then actually figure out where in the sky you're from. So you can actually connect with that star system, and you can get to know some of your innate superpowers, which might be hidden underneath the surface because you just never opened up to that part of yourself before. Or you just thought, well, that's crazy. I identify with elves, but why? Like, why do I have this weird thing with fantasy stories and elves? And why do I have this deep relationship? And why is it that when I'm riding in a car and the sun is sparkling through the leaves of the trees in patterns, that some part of me just finds this deep space of peace? So those and many other stories, you can come and join and work with me on September 17th here at Portal to Ascension. And I hope you guys will come and join me for that. And thank you again so much.